Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. April 19th, 2018.
The Kuhner Report is powered by Kelly Financial Services. Cleaning up your financial bull. Get the peace of mind that you deserve at Kelly Financial Services.
Hello, this is James Brown, the Godfather of Soul. I feel good. You're checking out my man, Mike Siegel. Hit it, buddy, hit it, buddy, hit it, buddy.
We are back with you, folks, for another big day of programming on the Kuhner Report. Jeff is off for the week. Delighted to be here with you, Mike Siegel, as the man said, and we are going to go right to it. Got a lot to cover today. You're going to get a lot of stuff today that is compelling, entertaining, worthwhile. Get that cup of coffee, sit back and relax, or that sandwich, and we will enjoy the afternoon together. We are joined by a gentleman from the Judicial Watch. And let me just say, Judicial Watch is an outstanding organization. Without them, we probably wouldn't know nearly anything that we do about all of these machinations going on behind the scenes at the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Hillary Clinton email scandal, even going back to Fast and Furious, even going back to the IRS scandal, all of that. We got so much documentation verifying wrongdoing thanks to Judicial Watch. Jim Peterson, I should say, is the senior attorney at Judicial Watch. Mr. Peterson, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. The reason we're going to be talking today is about Jim Comey, not with the grandiose appearances on various entertainment shows, which is pretty much unbecoming an FBI director in my view, but we'll leave that aside. I want to get to the very specific areas that you're dealing with regard to Comey, because you're suing the FBI for his book documents. Explain exactly what you're looking for there.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, we have filed a federal lawsuit seeking all the communications background documents and everything that went back and forth between Mr. Comey and the FBI. And we know there have to be such things, such information and documents, because under the law, there's a pre-publication review process that any former employee of the FBI must go through in order to publish something out into the public domain. And so that process apparently went on in the last number of months, because that's the only way he could legally publish this book. And we're interested in that because we know a little bit about this process. Typically it's a very long, tedious process where the FBI goes through and looks at literally every word and every comma and everything to make sure information is not inappropriately classified, confidential information is not inappropriately released. Somehow, though, in this case, Comey was able to get through this process very quick and easily, and get his book out so that he can make money right now off on his big tour. So that's what we're trying to find out.
Well, it's a very strange situation because of what you just said, and even when Louis Freeh did his book, he did it 5 years after he left as FBI director. And he did a book basically commending the FBI, the agents, the tens of thousands of agents who do the groundwork every single day. It was a different type of book entirely. This is, he talks about the president's hands. It's a book that's intended to unseat the president of the United States. But it's not by the rule of law. It's by the rule of entertainment and pizzazz and all the rest of that. So I'm not clear why the FBI would be a participant of that unless they're part of this so-called deep state, at least at the upper levels, that allowed him to just go ahead and do this carte blanche without any restriction. What about that?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, where is the current director of the FBI, for example? I haven't seen him out publicly commenting on this, but the fired most recent director of the FBI is out everywhere talking about talking about the sitting president, talking about his role in an open FBI investigation. I mean, it seems to be that all the top people at the Justice Department, all the current top people at the FBI, seem to have nothing to say about this. I mean,
Mr. Peterman, you know what's Peterson, I should say, what's frustrating about the work you're doing is on March 16th, which happens to be my birthday. Maybe that's ominous, I don't know. But on March 16th, you filed a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, to get this information. Of course, the FBI didn't respond. They're supposed to, under the law, they're the ultimate law enforcement agency of the country. Shouldn't they have abided by a Freedom of Information Act request and either sent you the material or said why they weren't sending you the material? What you have now a lawsuit. Why'd you have to file a lawsuit to get something you should have gotten by the request?
Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, we're at this strange situation, and that, you know, in our work, and this is just one example of it, but it's actually kind of now almost routine. Unfortunately, the only way to get the government to respond to these Freedom of Information Act requests that they are legally obligated to respond to is to file a lawsuit. Then they start to pay attention. Then they start to say, "Oh, okay, we'll see what we can do." You know, and it takes months, sometimes years, even at that point for them to do it. I mean, it's really kind of discouraging on one level that's the state of affairs, but they don't even respond. The federal government doesn't even respond to requests for Congress from documents, as you probably read. I mean, the committees are supposed to be perform an oversight function, and you see almost every day now that the House and Senate committees have to threaten to move for contempt or impeach officials or something just to get them to respond or to pay attention to them. We actually, strangely enough, have more success than Congress does in getting some of these documents more quickly or at all.
Well, it's look, you guys are doing enormous work, patience, deliberation, meticulous, taking every step to get the stuff, and you've gotten a lot. But this is very strange because you would think that a law enforcement agency would follow the law itself, number one. Number two, all they're doing is reinforcing the deep state notion of the people at the top of the FBI are in the pocket of either the Democrats or of the deep state protection agency, if you will. And I know you're doing a whole event with the Daily Caller. People from Judicial Watch will be talking about the deep state's intent to get rid of Donald Trump. And it seems like the FBI is part of that. They're supposed to be down the middle. They're not supposed to be doing this. Why do we have people at the top doing that? And by the way, when Comey intended to have a special counsel when he released, I believe, improperly and illegally, confidential documents, 7 documents, 4 of them arguably are confidential. The intent was to get a special counsel. Is there any connection? Do we know whether there was a relationship between that announcement and his having a wink and a nod with Rod Rosenstein that I'm going to give you, Mr. Rosenstein, the basis to go get a special counsel? Do you think they coordinated this, in other words, in some kind of conspiracy to get the special counsel? Oh,
I think they've more or less admitted that was what was going on, and that they wanted specifically their close friend and ally Robert Mueller to become that special counsel. It's really disturbing on one level, is that we kind of all grew up thinking that these were law enforcement agencies that are supposed to objectively, impartially enforce the law and themselves obey the law. And now what we have here is, almost indisputably, we have these political players at the top of the FBI who are selectively enforcing the law when it's convenient for them. They're not interested in Hillary Clinton, but when it comes to these things, they're very interested. They do all the and the idea that there's any kind of impartiality, is taking a real hit here because of these games they're playing as at the FBI.
You've also wanted other documents about Comey. In June of last year, 2017, you filed a lawsuit to get the memorandum written by Comey memorializing the meeting and conversation with the president that he had regarding the FBI's investigation of the Russian interference possibility. He never did tell the president that the dossier was the basis of that investigation, this smut dossier that's worth nothing, basically, except for the money paid by Hillary Clinton and the DNC.
Right.
Have you gotten any of that yet?
No, that's still these things often take a lot of time to work through the process. Civil litigation is slow, and we're still working on trying to get that out from the government, while at the same time the government winks and nods and lets Jim Comey run around and talk about everything he's done. Lets him laugh at the fact that he leaked. He's proud of the fact that he leaked out his own stuff,
and that's prosecutable. There are federal statutes that say you have to protect classified information, and as I said, 4 of 7 of those were basically classified. You also asked for in a lawsuit wanting how they handled the classified information signed by Comey, and you haven't gotten that yet. So basically they're protecting him from scrutiny as they are, as they did Hillary Clinton. It's just outrageous. But I wanted the audience to know that you're doing all that. Let me get a couple of calls in for you as we go to Tom, who's in New Jersey. Tom, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO, with Jim Peterson of the Judicial Watch. He's their senior attorney.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Great job, as usual, filling in for the Kuhner man. Hey, Mike, and for the Judicial Watch, I'm looking at a headline that says Ron DeSantis is making a criminal referral to the Justice Department regarding Comey, McCabe, Clinton, Strzok, and others. The only problem I have is that referral is going to Mr. Do-Nothing Jeff Sessions. I think Jeff, if he's not going to do anything with this referral, should step down and let somebody run with this who actually wants to stand up against this corruption and criminality. What do you think, Mike? And what do you think, Judicial Watch?
I think you've raised an important point. It wasn't just DeSantis. It's 11 or 12 members of Congress who contacted the Justice Department. I don't know where Jeff Sessions is. He may be out to lunch for about 3 months. Mr. Peterson, what about that?
Well, that's right. Jeff Sessions, call your office, because he doesn't seem to be anywhere to be found, and it's really disappointing because he's a good man. He's done a lot of good work in the Senate and elsewhere on a lot of important issues, but his absence in taking on any of these things is a key part of the problem here, and that there's nobody to stand up and tell the FBI and the Justice Department that they have to do these things, because that's their responsibilities under the law. And without the Attorney General there to do this, it doesn't. Not surprisingly, nothing is happening. So.
Arthur in Chestnut Hill for Jim Peterson of Judicial Watch. You're on WRKO, the Voice of Boston. Hello.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Judicial Watch, for all the great work that you do for this country. So just in simple terms, so we have the Clinton people for the longest time refusing to cooperate, destroying evidence, and lying over and over again, and getting exonerated by the FBI and the Justice Department, and then we have the Trump people who have cooperated, given over 1 million documents.
1.4 million, actually.
And there's not been 1 ounce of proof, and all we get is investigations of the wrong people, and on it goes. And something as an American citizen of 72 years, it just is. it disgusts me to watch this play out day after day after day. And, when your enemies don't want you to do something, I think that's what you do. And to be honest with you, he should have fired Trump and Rosenberg. Mueller and Rosenberg a long time, because Weissman and Mueller have a habit of finding innocent people.
By the way, for people here in Boston, I'm sure you know that it was Mueller who cut a deal with Whitey Bulger in order to get information from Whitey, and Whitey kept doing his dastardly things with the basically tacit approval of Bob Mueller. Did you know that?
Yes, and 4 innocent people were sent to jail with the FBI's knowledge. Two of them died while they were in prison.
And nobody ever held Mueller accountable.
Had to pay over $100 million to the families. And in the anthrax debacle, Mueller cost the government over $100 million there.
He's just like Comey. He started out the people thinking with this great integrity, and now it's gone away. I appreciate the call, and I thank you. So we'll come right back with Jim Peterson of Judicial Watch, Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We're back at it. Good to be in for Jeff today. Mike Siegel in, 1226. Let's go to your calls for Jim Peterson, senior attorney at Judicial Watch, trying to get documents surrounding Jim Comey and, in my view, his corruption. Let's go to Rob in Milton. Rob, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
Hey, good afternoon. Jim, how you doing, buddy?
Good, thank you.
Hey, listen, just a quick question. After watching the debacle yesterday in Weymouth, Massachusetts with the Uber driver, the illegal alien that they let go on rape and left the country, do you think all the lefties are trying to crash the judicial system on purpose because they know everybody's caught on to the fact that this is all corrupt?
That's a good question. Thank you for the call. Jim, go right ahead.
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing.
He was wondering whether the people on the left are trying to just break down the judicial system to create chaos. And his example was the Uber driver who was an illegal alien who raped a passenger, a woman, and then was allowed to leave the country.
Yes, that is a real concern. I mean, just kind of overall in a specific instance like that, we all have to. There's nothing. Our organization, what we try to do is to do everything we can to get the government and everyone to respect the rule of law, because only that way do we keep anyone involved in any politician, on the left, right, or anywhere else, from doing things in their own interest to achieve their own objective. We don't have the rule of law, and we don't try to keep the politics out of the law, out of the courts. Then we have these situations where we have Jim Comey running around for his own political agenda and to make money, and it corrupting the process. So yeah, I mean it is really outrageous in a lot of cases.
Freddie in Beverly, you're on with Jim Peterson of Judicial Watch at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. Is this the Peterson that's on with Hannity sometimes? Is this the same person on Judicial Watch, or I see him on Hannity?
You see a number of us on Hannity at times.
Okay, I didn't know if it was that person, but you guys do great work, and I really appreciate all the stuff that you do. I was wondering when you go for the Freedom of Information Act and you try to get documents, and they redact a lot of the documents and say that this is it's top secret or it's confidential material that you can't get. And it seems like a lot of times that they get rid of information that isn't really top secret information, but they're just trying to hide things from you guys, and they delay. And it seems like there's no real interest on either side of the aisle to getting a lot of this stuff. So 2 quick questions is, one is, how are you able to get information that they're trying to hide from you when they say it's confidential, but it's not? And also, is someone, I think Trey Gowdy said that Donald Trump could actually have more of a hand in getting this stuff as the president, that he could demand that his Department of Justice turn over these things, and he doesn't seem to be doing it either, just like Sessions.
That's a good question. Thank you. Jim, go right ahead on those 2 questions.
Sure. Yes, these agencies and the FBI in particular, try to hide all sorts of things by redacting, not releasing specific portions of documents, and we get pages and pages of documents that are often just all black because they say that they can't give it to us for some reason. And the way we get around that is, and we do sometimes, is we go to a court, we find a good, honest judge who will look at that on their own and then say, nope, you're wrong, the government's wrong, and they have to give it to us. And so there are ways around it, and we do what we can. In terms of getting, the president, telling the agencies to release these documents, yes, he can. He could do that right now. In these cases, he could. There's an opportunity there to, get to push the agencies from above to do this, and we hope that'll happen because they need a fire to be lit under them to get some of this information out.
Well, you're doing that every single day at Judicial Watch. We appreciate it. The audience appreciates it. Have a ton of calls, but haven't got time to get to them. But that's the kind of response you get because of the work you do, and I'm sure you're appreciated by people across this country. Mr. Peterson, I thank you for being with us. Good to have you here. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Have a good day, sir. 12:31 it is. Mike Siegel and Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We come back with David Horowitz, major conservative thinker, on his black book on the left. Stay with us.
WRKO, the Voice of Boston.
Back we are. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel and for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. Always a pleasure to be here. It's 12:37 in the afternoon. We're joined by David Horowitz, who is one of the great conservative thinkers in the country and actually started out on the far left, not so much as a thinker in those days. I guess he got a lot of reason over the years. Mr. Horowitz, how are you today?
I'm fine.
We have your new...
I actually did try to think in those days, but once you understand that progressivism, leftism, socialism, they're crypto religions. My brain was wrapped into a religious framework where we were going to redeem the world.
So there was a zealousness.
A zealot. Well, I have a slogan on my website at frontpagemag.com. Inside every progressive is a totalitarian screaming to get out. If you want to remake the world, if you think you can remake the world, to me it's completely absurd. I can't understand. We have these fires and floods. They kill people. They destroy communities. We can't control them. Yet these leftists think they can control the climate of the whole planet. Some screw is loose, as you can see in the thought process there. But it's because it does all the things a religion does. It gives your life meaning. It's a consolation for disappointments and so forth.
Given all of that, there's been a lot of attempt on the left to suppress free speech of others who disagree with them. We'll get to that, but
of course, inside every progressive is a totalitarian screaming to get out. They have this wonderful project to create heaven on earth. So of course you want to shut up anybody who gets in the way of the project. And if you have enough power, you're going to kill them. They'll shoot them.
Well, last I heard, the Soviet Union was supposed to be that utopia, all according to your need, and contributing what you could, and obviously it broke down. It went bankrupt. But your new
their minds are made up.
Their minds are already done.
With the facts.
Volume 9 of the Black Book of the American Left. Tell us what this is about in articulating the left.
Sure, and you can read the introduction and see a lot about that and the other 8 volumes of the series at blackbookoftheamericanleft.com. This book is called Ruling Ideas, and I think over the last 200 years, 2 ideas have ruled our history, and not just America's, but globally. And one is, or at least the secular societies, one is Marxism, and now it's taken a form of cultural Marxism, but it divides the world into oppressors and oppressed. It subordinates the individual into a category, whether it's capitalists or kulaks or cisgendered male, white males. You're always in a category which is more important than your individuality, than what you've actually done in this world. And that's why I call it totalitarian. And the other idea is the American idea, which is that we are all created by one creator, equal in the eyes of the creator. Therefore, governments must treat us equally. And we have rights that are given, that are God-given, to equality and liberty that no government can take away.
Well, you know, I want to just mention Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. She points that out, collectivism, that nobody is supposed to stand out above and beyond anybody else. Everybody's supposed to be mediocre and equal. It's offensive to be an outstanding success at anything.
Well, and it's worse than that. Look at what happened in Philadelphia at the Starbucks. Now, everybody knows that in all human interactions, there are complex situations. So let's say if you're blinded by ideology, then it's simple. The manager was white, and even though she's a woman, color trumps gender. So these guys were black, so they must be innocent victims, and she must be guilty of racism, and even if she's not a racist, unconscious racism. And that's the narrative that's accepted. The head of Starbucks, to his everlasting shame, is taking, 8,000 people off work so they could be trained in unconscious bias. We don't know what happened, but let's say here's two large black men in a city where probably 40% of the violent crime is committed by black males. They're not dressed like lawyers or accountants. She tells them they want to go into the restroom. She tells them it's a company policy. They have to buy something. And they say, F off, or whatever they said. We're not going to do it. So she gets scared. They're hostile. They're aggressive. And she calls the police. And the police come and they, once they're looking at the scene, they had no reason to cuff these guys. So it's a whole series of, more or less complicated human interactions, but because the politically correct leftist totalitarians dominate our culture, and of course in a city like Philadelphia, it's a Democrat city, so they're in power, it becomes a cartoon, white racist versus, even if she's unconscious, even if she's not actually a racist.
Well, you know what? David, they just came out now and said they feared for their safety. Are you kidding me? These two big guys feared for their safety. Number one, I don't care what color you are. If you go into a restaurant and you're not going to frequent the restaurant and you're just going to hang out there, I think there's a legitimate concern. You can't have people loitering, and it doesn't matter what color you are. Loitering in a business where people are coming in and out should reasonably be something that you do not accept. There's nothing wrong with that. Having that policy.
Right, but they flatten everything, so it becomes just this cartoon of race. You could look at the sexism, which was a terrible term invented by leftists to appropriate the moral authority of the civil rights movement in the fight against racism. Because women, were never treated the way blacks were treated.
Well, let me ask you about that's true. But let me ask you about a couple connected things. Number one is the notion of free speech, and number two is the notion of destroying the fabric of America. And by the way, now looking at the Department of Justice and FBI as part of that by trying to undermine a sitting president who was legitimately elected by the American people. Are we seeing an attempt here by the left to just destroy the country, reform it into basically
Absolutely.
What you pointed out, a totalitarian dictatorship run by the left?
It's been my mission for 30 years to warn conservatives are too nice, too generous, too tolerant, too willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. As I say, I mean this literally. These leftists, they want to shut down the other side because their mission is so noble. I mean, they're redeeming the world. So if you're on the other side, you're the devil, basically. They consider themselves the army of the saints. You're the party of Satan. If these people that we know, people alive today, if they had enough power, they would begin by putting you in jail and finish by, firing squads. That's what happened in Russia. It's not an accident. I mean, it's not an aberration. It's what's happened in every country where progressives have gotten absolute control. So, yeah, I think it's a very, very dangerous to shutting down of free speech. But what I wanted to say about sexism is we used to have, when we were civilized, many different ways of describing all the missteps that happen when the sexes interact, all of the bumblings and fumblings and miscues. We'd say this behavior is inappropriate, this behavior is boorish, this behavior is rude, this behavior is unacceptable, and this behavior is criminal. If it's rape, it's criminal. But now we just have one term, sexism. So what happens? You take somebody whom I have very little respect for, Al Franken, who was a senator from Minnesota and a comedian before he was a senator. He conducts these pranks where he gropes women on camera as a joke. So some of them probably thought it was funny. There's one that was asleep when he did it. She claims to have been offended. Okay, so that was offensive behavior. But the guy lost a Senate seat. He lost a Senate seat. It cost him, millions of dollars to elect him. Over 1 million people voted for him. Much as I don't like him, what kind of a society? And it's all based on accusations. He never had a chance to defend himself. That's what we've come to. It's terrible. And you talk about guilt by accusation. The Me Too movement is a lynch mob. Garrison Keillor, who is, again, somebody whose politics I abhor, but he was an icon at public television for 30 or 40 years. Now they not only took away his program, they erased his memory. It's like tearing down the statues. They took him out of the records. Why? Because some female said he touched her back inappropriately. Come on. This just criminalizes all, behavior. And that is totalitarianism.
Well, then they had to do it to their own because they couldn't show the duplicity of only going after conservatives. But the scary part of this is, and I've thought this for decades. I mean, I've been on the air talking about this for 20 years or more, about the fact that the left, if it had its way, would eliminate free speech. Obama tried it with net neutrality on the internet.
They've already done it on university campuses.
And they've done it
go to a campus without a bodyguard.
They've done it there, but
years.
Media Research Center just did a report, 50-page report, showing that Twitter and Google and Facebook are all suppressing conservative thought, notwithstanding Zuckerberg's ridiculous testimony.
Yeah, no, I've been banned myself for it. These are inside every liberal is a totalitarian screaming to get out, and the reason is they think they can make the world into a beautiful place. If you believe that you could end racism, sexism, homophobia, poverty, war, what crime would you not commit or support if you didn't have the spine to commit it? What lie would you not tell to accomplish such a beautiful end? And that's what explains what they do. They set out, the Democratic Party today is a lynch mob. They set out to destroy the person, the character of anybody who disagrees with them, who's articulate enough.
They won't even go along with. They won't even go along with the president having the right to appoint his own Secretary of State, a guy who was #1 at West Point in his class, a guy who was #1 at Harvard Law School, who was a good director of the CIA, a member of Congress, and, they have put less competent people on the left. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they have put less competent people on the right. And they into these positions, yet this guy is getting harassed because they're trying to undermine Trump. They won't approve or any of these.
The Democratic Party they've declared that they're resisting a duly elected president. That's treason. That's sedition. That hasn't happened since the Civil War. That was Lincoln was the last president that instead of accepting the election and waiting for the next one, to change things, they went into resistance mode. The only reason we don't have an actual civil war today is the federal government is way too powerful. So the civil war is being conducted over the executive office. It's outrageous that Democrats have tried to unseat Trump since he was elected. They never gave him 10 seconds of a presidential honeymoon.
And there's no question about that. We'll come right back. Stay right there. David Horowitz with us. His new book is called Ruling Ideas, Volume 9 of the Black Book of the American Left. If you want to respond about the danger of the left in this country, trying to clearly suppress free speech, doing it as we speak. As I said, those major social media have as an ongoing program suppression of conservative thought, and it's going on throughout the country with that attempt and that effort. Certainly the networks do it. They won't present a legitimate point of view on the conservative side. MSNBC, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, they're just suppressing a fairness that no longer exists as a word. Yellow journalism is where they are. Good to have you with us. 617-266-6868. Number to Boston for David Horowitz, leading conservative thinker. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. Stay with us.
WRKO.
Back we are. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel in. David Horowitz is here, one of the leading conservative thinkers in the country. We go to your calls. Glad to have you with us. Starting with Giggs in Weymouth. You're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Yes, hello, Mike. Hello, David. Some great points there, David. As you know, Harvard was built on the land of a former slave owner. So by the liberals' logic, all the jobs in Harvard should be given away to minorities. And, I know some of them are. And Elizabeth Warren has jumped in one of their seats. But that's the birthplace of affirmative action, so they should immediately use their idea of affirmative action to give all the professorships out to minorities, the descendants of slaves, according to their logic. And also, you mentioned Ayn Rand. She described, they asked to describe the difference between communism and socialism. And she said communism is achieved by the barrel of a gun, and it's murder. Socialism is when they vote in suicide.
Well, and that's going to be what's going to happen to people on the right if they get their way. I appreciate the call and I thank you. Let's go to Lou in Rhode Island. Lou, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO with David Horowitz.
Yeah, how you doing, David? One of my heroes, one of the greatest of all time. I have 2 points I want to make, 2 things I'd like you to discuss. The first one, in 1997, you came out with, Peter Collier, and wrote an article, and it became a little book called It's a War, Stupid. You remember that?
Yes.
And actually, I've seen it
to wake up conservatives.
What's that?
Well, we were trying to wake up conservatives. Conservatives are too decent. They're too well-mannered.
Well, right now I feel like Churchill in the darkest hour, where just the Nazis have taken over Europe. They've taken over our corporations. Basically, they frighten the corporations. They get them to try to take off, like Laura Ingraham and now Sean Hannity. They've taken over our colleges. The news media is no longer a news media. It's just a propaganda outlet for the left. And we're now on the verge of really being totally taken over. If they ever get their open borders, then they're just going to be totally infiltrated and taken over by by the left because they want to make them all new voters. The second, I'd like you to discuss this. Where do we go now in this war, and how do we turn it around? I think Trump has been a great godsend to us for that. The second
Thank you for calling. Let me have him answer that. We're short on time.
Yeah,
David, go right ahead.
I wrote a book about this called Big Agenda. Trump's plan to save America. It's about the left. I think your analysis of where we are is pretty correct. I have to say, I think things look much darker probably in Boston than they do in other parts of the country, although I've just left California, which is pretty much like Boston. The Americans have to defend themselves. People who love this country. The reality of slavery is this. All the black slaves were enslaved by blacks. White people did not go to Africa and throw nets over Kunta Kinte. They went to slave auctions where people who had already been enslaved by black African kings and rulers were sold to them. White America freed the slaves. That's our contribution. There were white slavers.
We've got to close out on.
Okay, but people should be very proud of what America did. We set the standard in the world for liberating slaves and ending slavery. There's still slavery in Africa today.
David. Well said, and we certainly have been should be proud of this country. We come back with, after all the latest news, Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at the Kuhner Report. Thanks to David Horowitz at the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
The Voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 100.7 WZLX HD2 Boston, an iHeart radio station.